that, but they're not questions. But does anybody have any questions about any of those items before I move into the other items? Okay. So we're going to talk about the evaluation framework now. And so I'm going to just show you one of the documents that I'll be referencing a little bit through this, but I'll pop back onto the PowerPoint. But it's called the Opportunity 2028 Measurement Framework, Shared Performance Measures. And this went out in the, this actually went out this morning because I realized I didn't attach it yesterday. But this is, we shared this at the information sessions, and I'm going to talk about it as I get into this piece of the presentation. But this is how you're going to determine where you fit in the framework for Opportunity 2028 and the bold goals. So I have the PowerPoint back on. Hopefully everybody can see that. So the evaluation framework. So there's no more logic model. I can see some people. And we still really do believe in the logic model as a great tool to think about your program and the long-term impact on clients. But as we thought about how United Way can help facilitate measuring the impact on the community level bold goals, the logic model wasn't it. And we can't talk about like programs in a way that's really impactful if everybody's measuring different things that are only applicable to their specific program, or they may be specific to other programs, but it's just not what everybody's measuring. So we can't talk about, if we're funding, 8 early childhood development programs, we can't talk about those programs and their results in a similar way. So that's where results-based accountability comes in. Results-based accountability looks not only at the local level, so to speak, the client population or the programmatic level, but it also looks at the population level data set. And lots of United Ways are moving to this model, as well as municipalities, other funders. So it wasn't something we just came to lightly. This has been an evolution over a course of years to be looking at this model. This is the cover of a book that is kind of it's a great resource around results-based accountability. If you're interested in learning more about it, it's a fairly quick read. And it's a good reference book, and I have it in my office, but you don't need to read this book to apply for this grant. I don't want anyone to feel like you have to, but if you're interested in learning more about kind of the why and the how of results-based accountability, this is a great resource for you. So why results-based accountability? It tracks results on a community level by measuring population level indicators. It shows and tracks impacts at both the program and population levels. Ensures partners are working towards the same shared goals. It allows data to be consistent and easily analyzed for impact. And it's a fairly simple framework that's easy to understand once you get, if you haven't used it before, it's probably going to take a little bit of getting used to, but it is a fairly simple framework. And in developing the framework, we work with the Center on Aging at the University of Maine. There was a great deal of research that went into developing this framework, and we're very confident in its ability to measure these bold goals. So how this fits into Opportunity 2028. So there are 3 levels of the shared performance measures. The top is the community level goals, and on our framework, this is called the goal. It's the what we plan to achieve, where we are now, and when we will achieve it. So these are the bold goals, which I'll talk a bit about in a second. The second level down are the conditions of well-being. So what conditions of well-being will be met under this bold goal? And finally, we get down to the how with the shared community indicators. And so this is the quality and quantity of services, resources, achievements, or improvements that you might see in your, likely in your client base, the how you will measure progress of the conditions of well-being that feed up into the community level goal. Before I move into the bold goals, are there any questions about RBA or why we might have moved into that model? Okay. So as we shared at the information sessions, the bold goals that have been identified for Opportunity 2028 truly are community level goals. There was a great deal of input that went into identifying these. We had a steering committee that represents all 5 counties, the 3 major issue areas of the bold goals, and to give input as we developed this framework. So the first bold goal is to meet basic needs and promote self-sufficiency for all. Why is this important? Because over 107,000 people in Eastern Maine are currently living at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. And by the year 2028, together, we will move more than 10,000 people out of poverty. How are we going to do that? So we will look, and we know that the United Way funding is not the only way that we're going to move the needle on these goals, but it's a big piece from our resource base of what we can do to move these goals forward. So underneath that bold goal, there are 4 outcomes. And I won't read the screen for you, but most of the bold goal, well, 2 of the bold goals have 4 outcomes, 1 has 2. And so then underneath these outcomes, there is the set of shared community indicators, which I don't think I have on a slide. So I'm just going to quickly stop the share and show you on the framework what I mean when I say community level indicators. So this is the basic needs bold goal. So you'll see at the top, in the top box, that's the goal with the headline indicator. Then you see the 4 outcomes below it. And then finally, you see the shared community indicators in the light blue. And these are where you will be determining how your program fits to that bold goal. The shared community indicators are the items that applicants will be measuring over the period of the grant to share how they're making progress towards the outcomes, and then up from that, the community level goal. So I'm back on the PowerPoint. If you don't see the PowerPoint, let me know. So this is an example for basic needs, and this example is a shelter. It's a theoretical example, a shelter that might offer some case management as well. And so in this particular example, the shelter said, okay, we feel like we fit under bold goal 1, the basic needs bold goal. They looked at the 4 outcomes and they thought our best fit is under 1.2. Families and individuals obtain or maintain safe, affordable, and stable housing. Well, how are we going to measure that? We are asking all applicants to measure at least 2 of the community level indicators. You can report on more than 2, but you have to do 2. And I'll get into a couple more examples. They don't all have to be in the same column. You can spread between, you might measure some under column 1 for your bold goal and maybe one under column 3, but it has to be in the same bold goal. So you can't switch between basic needs and early childhood development. If you pick basic needs, you're in basic needs. And that's the same for each goal. So this particular example, the shelter, they know that they can measure the number of individuals who secure affordable or emergency or transitional housing. And the other thing they can measure is the number of individuals who improve their ability to maintain stable housing. So they feel like they can measure those things and they can report on both of those items for their for their particular application. This second example is in the substance use disorder, bold goal number 2, to prevent, treat, and support recovery from substance use. I think I may have mixed up my slides here. Oh, okay. I just mixed up how I'm talking about them. Sorry. So now I'm just talking about the framework again. This is an example. This is the actual framework for bold goal number 2, to prevent, treat, and support recovery from substance use disorder. Why is this an important issue for Eastern Maine? Well, last year, 107 people died of overdoses, or in 2016, 107 people died of overdoses. Our goal over the next 10 years is together we will eliminate deaths from substance use disorder. And I like to pause on this one, as I have at all the sessions I've done, to just note that we know that deaths are not the best or the only indicator of success for this particular goal of prevention, treatment, and supporting recovery. But currently it is the most reliable data set that is tracked over time. So we do suspect that during the course of the funding that we may be looking, you may see the headline indicator change because it's more than deaths. But United Way of Eastern Maine thinks we might be able to play a role in talking with partners who are working on this issue to see what are you measuring, how can we maybe talk collectively about this. And we know that this grant application will help us get a sense of what information is out there and being collected. So it's just important to note, because our board talked a lot about, is this the right headline indicator? And so did the steering committee, but ultimately we landed that this is the best data set right now over time. So there are 2 outcomes under bold goal number 2 for substance use disorder. And again, I won't read both of them, but one is essentially about access and one is about prevention. And again, if you go to your framework, if you have a printout or you have it on your screen, you'll see there are a number of shared community level indicators underneath each one of these outcomes as well. So this example is a substance use disorder program, and their feeling was that they fit under outcome number. Their best fit of the 2 outcomes was the second outcome, increasing access to the full spectrum of accessible and affordable treatment and recovery services. And they're actually going to measure 3 different things because they can, and they already are, and they can easily report on it. They're going to talk about the number of individuals who are experiencing reduced barriers to treatment and recovery services, the number of individuals who are experiencing progress towards their treatment and recovery goals, and the number of volunteers who gain skills and knowledge to provide recovery supports. Because this particular program does not only actual programming around substance use disorder for people that are struggling, but also they're training peer recovery coaches. So this particular program can do both can measure the volunteer piece, 2.1.6, but also how those individuals are progressing in the program that they're offering. I think I might have a question, hold on. So the question is around, should more than one outcome be selected, or is one outcome sufficient? One outcome is sufficient if that's what works for you, Jean. And I think I'll get into it a little bit as I delve a little bit deeper here. But the most important thing is that you're picking 2 community level indicators, and that might dictate your outcome that you're picking. So one is okay. And finally, bold goal number 3, ensuring all children have high quality early learning experiences. Why is this important? Well, only 48% of children in Eastern Maine are reading proficiently at the end of 3rd grade. So that's an indicator that that the high quality early learning experiences are not necessarily there for all those children. So together, we will increase the percent of children reading proficiently at the end of 3rd grade to 58% by 2028. This bold goal also has 4 outcomes, and which I again won't. See, it goes everywhere from increasing access to programming, you can't hear me. Can everybody not hear me? Because it looks like my microphone's working.
I was experiencing some network problems. It was like, it was stalling and freezing.
I think I have a spotty internet connection. Okay. So I've asked John if he can help me with the spotty internet, but I don't know that he can. He can. Okay, so it's definitely my internet, but just let me know if that's happening, and we'll just keep going. It's weird to talk this much. Okay, so now how do you think about selecting the shared community level indicators for your program? As I mentioned, programs must select at least 2 shared community indicators, and programs can select community indicators from different outcomes under the same bold goal if they align with your work. So for example, in the early childhood development area, you might pick an indicator that's under the access, so families are able to access the high quality care, but you might also be working on professional development for the staff that are supporting those children that are accessing that care. And so you could, for example, pick one of the indicators under that first column that's all around access, and then another one over the far column that's around professional development, as long as they're under the same bold goal. So as I noted before, you can't pick an indicator that appears under basic needs and then one that's under substance use disorder. When you're doing your application, you are picking one bold goal that you are applying under. And I do know that there are a number of programs out there that are impacting items across the spectrum, but that's always been our approach. If when you're applying for funding with United Way of Eastern Maine, you're kind of picking where you think you best fit. When you think about selecting your shared community indicators, here are a couple of questions to think about. What are the goals and activities of your program? What data are you already collecting? How do you measure success? And who does your program impact? Might be clients, caregivers, family members, children, parents. You can think about this from a couple of different perspectives because your program is often impacting multiple populations. Yes, I will send a copy of the PowerPoint out after. Somebody asked, not just randomly saying that. Okay. Okay, this is where it's going to get tricky here because I'm going to go over kind of application so before I move into that section, I'll give a chance for people to ask some questions. We will talk a little bit more about content of the application as I go through this, but I'm going to be switching back and forth between the PowerPoint and the online portal so people can see the online portal. So before I go into that, when you think about the measurement framework and the shared community indicators, are there any questions? Okay, I'm just going to check on my time. I'm doing pretty good. Okay, so the application and the online portal overview. Applications will open on Friday. They were going to open last Friday, but the application needed a little bit more testing. So we do anticipate it will open Friday. If not, and if we can get it out before, we certainly will. We will be announcing virtual office hours, which we will do through Zoom, which is this format, where people can log on and ask questions to us. We're doing this in an effort to streamline our ability to be responsive to folks, but also to utilize technology in a way that we haven't in the past. So we're hopeful people will take advantage of that. It'll be drop-in. You don't have to come for the whole hour. And it doesn't mean you can't access it at other times, but certainly trying to do that for people. We did extend the application deadline, which we announced at the trainings last week. So hopefully people are happy about that, and they will be due Friday, January 25th. And we plan to announce the funding decisions in May or early June. It all depends on the timeline of when our board makes those final decisions. We always make an effort to try to do it as in advance as possible, because a lot of folks are on a July 1 fiscal year, and knowing if you have the funding coming or not is very important. But it just really depends on, our board doesn't meet until the end of the month every month. So if the decision timeline gets pushed a little bit, those notifications might end up being towards the beginning of June, but that's kind of worst case. And then again, July 1 is when the funding starts, and the allocation begins in August. So we pay quarterly, do quarterly payments, and the first payment is in August, but you will know for before July 1. So what's different? We extended the funding cycle to 3 years, and in the past session, some folks had questions about that. So we used to do 2-year funding. Now we're making a 3-year commitment because we want to see the impact towards the bold goals over time, but also giving you some stability in that funding piece to know you have the 3-year commitment. We are hoping to fully fund grant requests whenever possible. Fully funding the highest scoring grant requests whenever possible. And this is something we haven't made a statement like that before, and so this is our goal. But in some ways, it is a bit of an experiment to see kind of where we're landing with that, and it will have to be some conversation our board has around that when the time comes. And funding requests, we've never had a maximum, and now we've instituted a maximum request of $50,000. We always encourage people to ask for what you need, and also note that your request cannot be more than 35% of your program budget. So this is not your agency budget. This is not if you were applying for 3 different programs from your agency. This is for each program you're applying for. The request cannot be more than 35% of the total program budget. So if your program budget, $50,000 is more than 35% of that, you can't request that maximum. And there is no minimum request. How did the decisions get made? The decisions are all made by volunteers, of which you can apply to be a volunteer if you'd like. Oh, good question, Jane. Is the $50,000 the 3-year max or the annual max? And that is an annual request. So when you're filling out your application, everything is annual. So even though we're looking for 3-year funding, so your budget is for 1 year. My internet connection is unstable. Am I back? Okay, thank you. Great. So it's always a 1 year for your budget, as well as any data that you're entering. Great question. So the decisions are made by volunteers. As I noted, you can apply to be one. We just make sure we mitigate just because you might be applying or you are applying for the grant, it doesn't mean that you won't be eligible to be a reviewer. The decisions are based around demonstrated community needs, the quality and the strength of the application, the alignment with the Opportunity 2028 bold goals, geographic impact. Although there was a question around, you want a certain amount of programs per county? That's not what that means. The geographic impact is really around like almost the breadth of the impact. Your organizational capacity, fiscal responsibility, and measurable results are key items that help to make the decision. These are probably not every single item though. So how do you get to the application? You will find it at andar.unitedwayem.org. So note there is no www. We will send out the link when we send out all the updated login information once the application is live. So now is my chance to show you some of that. And I'll try it this way. I didn't, okay. So I'm gonna move into some of the technical aspect now of the application. So when you get to, when it's time to log in, you're gonna be brought to a login screen. You're very likely going to be asked to update your password, even if you already have an access to our online system. So just be aware of that. And you will log in. You will not necessarily have all of these roles. I have some different roles based on what I do with the portal. So you may not have to do this step. But if your organization had ePledge, for example, you might have to go in and change your role. But the instructions will outline that. So the item I'm going to reference here is the, there's an online application instructions. We're not seeing the login screen. Okay, thank you. Do you see the online screen now? Okay, thank you. So basically what I just went through was kind of your basic login screen. So I think most folks are familiar with logging into an online platform, so I won't go back to that step. The document I am referencing here is called the online information, let's see. Sorry. I'm just going to pause that share and just share the document so people know what I'm talking about. It's the online application guide. And it's just a Word document. And it's a series of screenshots and instructions for using the system. So definitely keep this handy to reference when you're going to actually apply. I'm going to share one other document that I'll be referencing in addition to so we'll also be talking about the measurement framework again, which I already showed, but there was, I may not have pulled it in, let's see. So I don't know if I can share this. It's an application reference question guide. And I'm just not seeing it on my screen to share, but it did go out in the email. So this document is an attempt to help you, if you wish, to type your information into a Word document along the way, to save, to copy and paste into the online portal, and all of those things. But please do not email us the Word document as your grant application, because that will not be accepted. But all these materials again will go out again. But so you'll see some of the questions here when I go through the online portal, and they're just going to appear quickly on the screen. Don't bother to scribble down notes to think about, well, what's that question, and I want to know how to answer it. You'll have the guide that you can look at even before the portal goes live. So can everybody see the screen that says United Way of Eastern Maine Application and Reporting Portal? Okay. I'm getting some, great. So what's going to happen here is when you log in, this is the screen you'll see. And you're going to have to click on Applications and Reports. And if you've applied for grants before through United Way of Eastern Maine, you will see a number of reports. Like you'll see I'm a test application, so I have everything we've ever done. But for purposes of this grant application, you're going to click on the FY 2022 United Way of Eastern Maine application. And this is the whole application package. So keep in mind, even though your login will be individual to you, the account you end up getting into for the grant applications is agency-wide. So if your organization has a number of programs that you're applying for, you just want to be cognizant of making sure that the data that you're putting in is your program, and that you're not accidentally going into a different program when you are picking. So the screen you're going to see is you'll see that this is the agency section of the application at the top. And then programs. So you'll see we have in here, we have test program 1, and I think we have maybe even 3. Test program 2 and test program 3. But in your instance, when you're logging in, it's going to be the names of the programs that you put in with your letter of intent. So you'll look specifically for the name of your program that you are responsible for entering the application information for, and you may be doing all of them, but in some cases there are multiple folks at an agency working on an application. So the agency section only has to be done once, and it is all about, essentially it's around kind of that organizational accountability and stability. That's really what the section is about. But we ask for a couple of things. There are some required agency documents that you need to upload. We need a list of your board of directors. There's an administrative and financial review form to be filled out, which you may have if you have a CFO or a bookkeeper or a treasurer. You might ask them to do that for you. It's not so high level that program directors or executive directors can't do it, but there are some questions on there that require some calculations and things like that. And then finally, this memorandum of agreement, this is kind of the sample of what the agency agreement looks like. So these are the things, this isn't a final version of the agency agreement. It hasn't been made up for this coming fiscal year, but I'm unstable again. I can see the chat coming right up. Am I back? Am I back? Yeah. Thank you. I have a friend on the phone who's very helpful. Thank you. So the required agency uploads. If you've never received funding from United Way before through our grant process, we do need a copy of your 501c3 status. So that's a letter. Your tax letter. If you've already been funded by United Way, we don't necessarily need to review that. But we do need from everybody your most recent IRS 990 and your most recent financial audit, financial review, or financial compilation. And there are a number of places within our documentation where we share at what levels you're required to have each one of those items. So there are some thresholds. Very few agencies will be able to only submit a financial compilation. Most organizations are going to be doing submitting their audit, but some might fit into that financial review category. So when you get to the screen, if nothing's uploaded, you're going to see there's no documents available for display, and you would hit next. Oh no, that brought you to the next form, sorry. An important piece around navigation of this form is that you want to use the buttons in the portal versus your back browser button. Like, do not use this browser button because it could bring you back and then you'll lose your work. So really use the buttons at the bottom of the pages to navigate. So I'm going to go back to my previous screen for the upload. This is going to bring me back to the screen. I don't know why I don't know how to upload that. Huh. I don't know. John, I don't know why there's not an upload thing here. I'm missing something here. It's not as hard as this makes it seem right now. It's a simple upload. So I'm just going to go back and go to the next piece and see if somebody can tell me from my team what I'm missing here. So the board of directors, again, it's a form that you'll be submitting that has your board of directors lists. Then the administrative and financial review. This is that form I referenced. You may have your CFO or other complete for you, but again, you can complete it by reviewing your financial documents and doing some of the calculations that are listed here. Once you complete, you'll notice at the bottom of some pages, you'll see these instructions to remind you what the buttons mean. These don't appear on every page, but so this page doesn't even have a save button, and it says there's, so what save means. So in this instance, you, well, we need to fix that. That doesn't align with those buttons. So I think there's something with this form that may be closed already. That's why I'm not seeing it the same way. I don't know. Let me see if I'm sorry about this. Okay. If you hit next, it brings you to your next form. When you hit return, it brings you back to kind of the menu screen. And when you hit previous, it will bring you back to the previous form. It's almost like a version of the back button. What I'm guessing is, so when you hit submit on a form, yeah, you can see here, okay, this is why. So these agency forms are showing as completed. And that means they have been, the submit button has been hit. Can you, okay, and they've been sent to United Way of Eastern Maine. So I now, if I'm a pretend applicant, I cannot make those edits because the form has been completed. So I would be emailing grants@unitedwayem.org or calling the office to be like, can you unlock my forms? Which we can do as long as the deadline hasn't passed. And maybe someone can do it for me now. So I can show you what the forms really look like there. But again, the agency forms are, they're a little bit more standard, and it's uploading documents, it's responding to the forms, what have you. So I'm going to move into the program forms. So every form, every program that you're applying for, you will complete every single one of these forms. And you can see in the status bar for these program forms, everything is outstanding, so nothing has been submitted to United Way of Eastern Maine. The thing about this application is you submit it section by section. There's not a button on the bottom of this overall application form that says submit all. So you want to make sure, if you're responsible for program 1, that once you finished your section, that everything in your status bar says complete.
Yeah, I do.
Is anybody still on this call here?
Yes, I am, but I don't know how for much longer.
All right, I'm just gonna hang out also.
Yeah.
Me too, just waiting.
I'm going to try to rejoin the meeting.
I'm still on. Okay, I'm back. This is, hey, I still got 28 people, so you all waited. That was good. Thank you. I apologize. Let's hope that we're good to go. Okay, I'm going to go back to the online portal. You could try that, Jeff. So somebody said, I wonder if shutting off our video would lessen the bandwidth burden. It's worth a shot. I'm talking to myself anyway, and I monitor the chat. So let's see if that works. We've got, yeah. Okay, so I think where I was the program cover sheet. Can folks see that program cover sheet on the screen, or the United Way? I'll scroll down a little bit here. Cover sheet.
Okay.
Yes, 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 thank you. Okay, so the cover sheet is pretty basic. It's really your chance to just kind of share some basic information about your program. Again, this is a program form, so it applies to everybody. You're going to enter things like contact information for your director, your agency director, your program director, your finance contact, if there are any other grant contacts. And this one around a one-sentence description for your program is important because we use that information in different publications and things like that. So it's helpful to have something really concise to talk about your program. This is also where you're going to put your request per year. That question came up earlier. This is per year. So if you're asking for $15,000 per year, you would put that in per year. You will also select the Opportunity 2028 bold goal under which you are applying. So basic needs, substance use disorder, or early childhood development. Now you'll see this form has not yet been submitted, so these instructions apply. So if you were starting your program sheet, but you needed to go back and check if somebody was going to be a contact on the form, you can save the form, and this allows you to come back and work on it again later. What I do suggest people do is that you bookmark that web address for Andar if you're going to be going back and forth. That way you can very quickly get back to your application without searching through your email to get the link. So if you save it, you can come back and work on it. If you're done with it, the cover sheet's pretty simple. You might be done with it. You can hit the submit, and that finalizes your work and sends it to us at United Way. We don't monitor these in real time, so don't worry about if you finish something and you just want to get it off your list and submit it, go ahead and do that. we're not going to look at the full package until after the deadline. So you can feel good about doing that if it helps you in your process. So you can think of the next and previous buttons as your forward and backward browser buttons, but again, we suggest that you do not use these backwards and forwards as we're often used to using, because that could allow you to use data, lose data that you've entered. The other piece that's important is that this is a web-based application and it will time out on you. So if you've just been kind of idle for a while, it will time out, which is one of the reasons we're sending the Word document so people can kind of work in that if they'd like, and then copy and paste. But so just be careful of that, particularly on some of the forms that might take a little bit longer. You don't want to have been working, doing a great deal of work, and then find that that is gone because it timed out on you. So, and I don't know how long it takes for it to time out, you know, anything like that, but just be aware. So if you wanted to navigate the forms, you could use the next button. I like to hit return, so it brings me back to that main screen where I can see the whole list. So the piece I'm going to go over now are the shared performance measures, the bold goals and outcomes. And this piece, this is where we're talking about that shared performance framework, that color-coded grid handout that you got. So this is where you're telling us how you meet the bold goals. So we've been using this as a sample, so you're going to see some data entered here under scope and outcome. When you log into yours, you're not going to have anything here, okay? But you have to enter a couple of items to be able to have content for the next section of your application. So we're going to pretend there's nothing here and it's blank. I could try to delete it, but I think there's content in it, so I can't delete it. Okay, so when you log on, there'll be nothing here. You're going to hit add. You are going to select which bold goal you're applying under. Okay, so your program is applying under, and you'll see the drop-down list, all three. We're gonna say we're applying under early childhood. So you're gonna pick bold goal number 3. Within bold goal number 3, you're going to pick which community level outcome you are selecting. And the question earlier around, does it have to be 2? Can it be 1? In this instance, we're going to say that they're applying under the increasing access outcome. And you're going to enter that. You can see from this drop-down list that all the items, the numbers, correspond with the numbers in the shared measurement framework. So you can use that as a guide using the framework, and I've seen a lot of people write right on that framework, circling what indicators they think they fit for measuring, what outcomes they fit under. But you can use those numbers as a reference point to these drop-down lists as well, because I know some of these get a little bit wordy. So we're going to say that they're applying under oh, thanks. Excellent change with the drop. I love it. Okay. So we're going to say they're increasing access to preschool and quality early child care programs. And you do not have to worry about this sequence. That's not something you need to be editing. So we're going to add that. So I'm just going to scroll past those other samples so it doesn't get too confusing having those there. So this goal 3, ensuring all children have high quality early learning experiences. For my application, I am only going to be measuring one outcome. So I don't have to enter anything else in this section. If for your application, that sample I used earlier where I said, well, we're measuring access I mean, we're increasing access, we're reducing barriers. But we're also supporting the professional development of the teachers. At this point, you'd also be entering another outcome. I might as well show it because I'm talking about it, where you would say, okay, again, I'm doing early childhood development, and I'm also doing providers and professionals deliver quality educational experiences, and I'm adding that. That is not required, but in some instances, people will be doing that. There is a question. Okay, there's not. So I'll just go ahead and delete this one because I just wanted to show that as a sample, but it's not necessarily going to apply to everybody to do it that way. So now that I've entered my outcome and I'm not doing any other outcomes, this section is complete. And I'm going to hit return. If I were done, you might wait on this outcomes and indicator section. You might want to do it as a packet, but you could submit it to United Way. But I'll just hit return. And so now we need to talk about how we're going to measure those outcomes. So we have to enter the indicators. So I'm clicking on the indicators page. You again will not have anything here, okay? So ignore that there are items here. I do not think I'll be able to delete them because I think there's sample data in there and it's going to tell me you can't delete this, there's data in here. So I'm going to just scroll down and pretend there was nothing on this page. Somebody asked it automatically save the outcomes I chose. On these particular forms, it does save them. So by adding it to a list, it saves it. So it did save those outcomes, and you'll see that in a minute, Lisa, okay? So I'm pretending there's no indicators. I selected that early childhood development outcome. So on the indicators page, I'm gonna hit add. And it's going to show up. Now it's saying select an outcome. I'm selecting an outcome that I have entered in the outcome section. So you'll remember there were those two sample ones in there that I'm pretending are not there, which is maybe a little bit confusing, and I apologize for that. But we also remember I just entered this increasing access to early childhood development or high quality childcare programs as an outcome. This is the one I entered. This is where I have to be measuring two different indicators for. So I'm entering now my first of the two indicators. I selected my outcome from the dropdown. Again, we're not worrying about sequencing. And here I am referencing my framework, and I am going to be selecting the community indicators that I will be measuring to talk about the increased access to preschool and quality early learning programs. So these are items you're choosing. We have purposefully made these very broad, and you will have a chance in the outcome measurement narrative to describe how you will be measuring these things. So I'm going to say, for my purposes, I'm going to be measuring, first of all, I'm going to measure the number of parents and caregivers experiencing reduced barriers to accessing childcare and programs. And here is where you have to enter some data. So over the course of the year of your program, how many parents and caregivers do you anticipate will experience reduced barriers to accessing the childcare and programs? This is an educated guess. If you're already measuring things like this, you have some data you can use to make that determination, but you will be entering a number here. So I'm going to say 25. But this will be up to you to figure out. And then you will hit add, and adding in this instance will save it. And so ignoring those other two examples, the one that we entered is showing right here. There is this bar on the far right that says achieved. and it's going to say no for everybody right now. So don't get freaked out by that. That's because you're just entering target data. There is nothing to compare it to. So don't be worried about that. So I've entered one of my 2 indicators. Now I have to add a second one. So you'll see the same screen again we are talking about the childcare example. And see, you notice this, the page like refreshed, it saved it for me in this piece. And now I need to select a different community level indicator. And we're going to talk about the number of children experiencing improved well-being. This might actually be more. The numbers between your indicators don't necessarily have to relate. This is for your overall program, how many children will experience improved well-being. So maybe we were reducing barriers for 25 families, but 100 children are going to experience improved well-being. So those 2 numbers can be independent of each other, but they're all about the same program that you're applying for money for. I'm adding that. And you'll see now both of those are showing up on my list. Penny, so that I think is maybe a different, Penny's question is around the problem statement or an indicator of success. It's the phrasing of the indicators. I can tell you we had lots of conversation about this in the development of these performance measures. I think we might have to talk a little bit more about that, but it's consistent. I think you'll find throughout the framework that that's how the phrasing is. So I'm not sure if I can really address your question very well, but we can talk more about that offline. I don't want to, unless it's like a stop for you for moving forward right now, but I just want to keep getting through the application, if that's okay. So in this instance, unless you were going to add any more community indicators, which you may, you can add more than 2, and we do encourage that if you have the data available. And I've said before, it doesn't impact the scoring. If you add more indicators, it doesn't mean you score higher. But if it tells the story of your program and you have the information available, I think it helps to bolster your overall application to include additional. So I have completed entering my community indicators, and I want to wait. I'm not quite ready to submit because I want to see how everything looks together. So I'm going to hit return. Lisa's asking about the comment box. You don't have to use the comment box under that form to describe that number unless you feel like there's a reason you need to. But you have a whole narrative section where you're going to put some more information behind your numbers. So I don't think that it's really necessary to use that unless there's some reason that you feel like, you know, if you think it seems like a low number or something, or you're afraid the reviewers will think it's a low number, you might, but I think you'll see if you feel like you'll get to explain it enough with the narrative. So now we've finished entering our outcomes and our indicators, and now we will move to the performance narrative. This is a more simple it's a more simple online form, but you have to respond for each of the indicators that you've entered. So you're going to be describing some information in detail for each of your indicators. So this one doesn't have a drop down where you're going to pick the indicator. You're going to have to put in the indicator. So if we can change that, we will, but I suspect we've already tested that and that we can't. This is really, what will happen is that this appears as an independent form to the reviewers. So to enter that, even if you copy and paste it out of the framework itself, that might be a tip to do that more quickly, but you want to make sure the reviewer knows what you're talking about. So for each of the indicators you're measuring, you're going to describe the activities, strategies, or services you're using to define that indicator. Again, we've left these broad and up to you to define. How the activities and services feed up to influence the outcome above it, and how these contribute to the overall community level goal of the headline indicator. And we do want to know a little bit about how these positively impact your clients over the short or long term. And again, the data collection method. So maybe you're doing a survey. Maybe you're doing observation, maybe you're, you know, how are you, maybe it's intake forms or things like that. So you have to tell us how you're getting the data. And then the second, for the second indicator, you'll see there's already 2 on here. So you're answering this question for each of the indicators you're going to report on. And so you'll answer all the same questions again. In some cases, your data collection method is going to be the same tool that you're using for both of them, and that's okay. You don't have to create different tools to measure the indicators. That survey example is probably one where you would be getting multiple sets of data around different things. Here is where, if you are measuring more than 2 community indicators, you would pick yes on this radio box. It usually defaults to no, I think. So you would select yes, and the questions will populate again to answer these same questions for your additional community level indicators. Here is a form where you need to make sure you hit save. It's not going to save it for you. So hitting anywhere there's a save button on a form, it's a safe bet the form is not going to save for you. So if you're going to come back to work on it, hit save. Do not hit return or next or previous without hitting save, because it will not save your work and you'll have to go back and do it again. If you had completed that form and you felt good about it and it was ready to go, this is one where you would hit submit and it would go to United Way and show on your list as complete. Any questions about this form? Okay. We are asking for program level demographics around age and around counties. We use this information in a lot of cases to tell the story of the impact that United Way has overall, and specifically our geographic reach. So this information is really important to us. And when you're entering your information around your demographics, it's around the whole program. So it's not necessarily tied to just that set you're measuring for the outcomes and indicators, but it's for if your program is serving 150 kids, this number for age should be 150. And it won't be, it already is populated for 155 and up, which it probably wouldn't be for a kids program. But so here you might say, we're serving kids 0 to 8 and we're serving 150 kids with this program, and you'll see it populated at the bottom. And some programs and conversations we've had at some of the trainings, they don't know. They might not have information around age, or they might know some of the age brackets, but not all of them. So maybe you have some good data around 18 to 24-year-olds and 25 to 54, but there are still more people that are being served by the program that are truly unknown. It's okay to enter information in that unknown box. Again, this is a form where you want to make sure to submit. I mean, save, sorry. Do we want, okay, there's a couple more questions here. Okay, if we're a statewide agency, would we show demographics on the statewide population or just the United Way region? We're most interested in the United Way region, but if your program truly, and it's easy enough to have that data, it doesn't hurt to enter it here. We get this a lot with the county one specifically, where we might have people that their program serves outside of United Way service area, like Knox County or something, for example. And a lot of programs do provide that data, and it ends up in the kind of unknown, even though you know it, but we don't have a box for Knox County. We are most interested in the United Way service area numbers, and that's what I'm going to say. That's what we fund based on. We don't fund based on numbers served, but like when our volunteers are making decisions, they want to know the impact within our service area. So don't do unnecessary work to include statewide data. But if it's readily available and accessible, you can include it. The question, do we want existing numbers of clients, or do you want how many we project we will serve with the new funding? It's what you project you will serve for the year. We know that this will vary year by year of the grant, but kind of on average, what do you think during the 3-year funding period each year you'd be looking at? Okay, so we've completed the demographics form, and you can hit save to go back to it later. If you need more information, you can submit it. But before you hit any of these return next or previous, make sure you either save or submit, or it's gone. I'm going to show you the county demographics. So there was already data in these ones. But this particular program, I think my example before, I said it was 150 children, and you're going to tell us where those 150 children are coming from. They could all be from one county. You might have some that are from multiple counties. So we'll say we've got 25 here, we've got 50 here, 10. You know, like you would enter. So the important thing about your demographics form, and I'm not going to go through and actually finalize it and submit it, but your demographics have to equal the same total number. So I'm just going to X out of this because I noticed this when I was moving to the screen. You see here where it says total equals 100. So the total age and the total county need to be the same number. You need to be talking about the same number of people for your whole program. And the number 100 had already been in there. I should have kept going with that for my example, but I went to 150. So that's just important because your forms won't work right. You might get an error message if it's not matching, and that's why, because you need to be talking about the same set of people that are served by your program. Does anybody have any questions about demographics? Okay, and so now we have a program narrative. This is really important. And so for those of you who have been funded previously under the logic model held a lot of weight in the review process, probably more weight than the narratives. Now that the framework has done most of the work for you in determining what is going to be measured, I mean, you're determining the how and the data that you're going to submit, and you're tracking that, and that's definitely work. I'm not trying to discount that, but for the application review process itself, you should expect these narrative portions to weigh heavily in the review process. So this is a pretty traditional online form where you'll be completing around some questions for your program. You're again going to talk about alignment, who you're serving, how people access your services, what they're doing, what are some challenges. The success story is really important, and talking about how it tells a story, it tells a picture, it paints a picture of your story, and the reviewers really do look to that. So it's important to kind of think pretty strongly about how you want to put that forward. We also use them as we think about what can we highlight in the fundraising campaign and on our website and social media. So we look to these as a guide to say, like, what can we feature? So just know we wouldn't just feature you in our brochure or video without talking to you. But we do use this as kind of stimulus to figure that out. And also it can be de-identified. So if you're concerned about confidentiality or things like that, you can, use assumed names and things like that, but we do need the story. So I won't go over every question in the section, but there was a question around character count, and they do not have a character count. We have had them in the past. We don't want to limit your opportunity to put in the information you want to put in, but just be aware that you want to be consistent, you want to be concise, you want to be able to not be repetitive in your responses, because the reviewers all look at these independently, but they read a lot of applications. And so the more concise you can be, the better it is. There's a question, is there one narrative per bold goal or one per outcome? There is one narrative per program application you're submitting. So it essentially is there's one narrative for the whole program application. So this isn't tied to you're doing it per outcome or per indicator like the outcome measurement narrative form is, or the performance narrative form is. This is really right. This program narrative is a picture of your whole program. You're telling the story. Okay. So this is one where save is going to be critical, right? Because you're probably going to come back and forth to this form a few times. Again, once it's done, hit submit. Return is in essence a cancel button. So you could just look at it and want to get out of it quickly. You can hit return, which I'll do now, but you want to make sure you're saving. Program budget. We have a pretty simple budget, I think. It's pretty general, but we ask, there are expenses and revenues here. So this top section, lines 1 through 700 are all your revenues, your income. You're going to enter here. So your United Way grant request for 1 year, this figure should match what's on your cover sheet. Again, this is program specific. The agency financials that get submitted under the agency section are also reviewed by the same group that reviews the financials for the agency are not necessarily the same people who are reviewing your narrative or your program application. So you want to make sure you're entering all and we know that this is anticipated budget. We know budgets change, so your best look into the next year for this application. For your grants, you're going to put in anticipated grants. You might have applications out, but you don't know if they're going to come in or not. For now, you're going to put them in as your expected revenues. Unless you feel like it's really kind of a shot that you don't know, but most people put those anticipated revenues in. And the same is for expenses. So it's your anticipated expenses for the upcoming year. The great thing about United Way funding is that we don't tell you how you have to use it. I mean, you need to report to us on whether you're meeting the outcomes and what you said in the application, but the overhead question comes up and some other funders won't fund indirect or they won't fund salaries, and you can use it for any program related expense. So I might have a question here. Okay. So there is also a program budget narrative. So you will submit there can be compensation other than salaries. So are you suggesting that there should be another line on the budget form, or asking if there can be? in that instance, if it's not straight up salaries, okay, a stipend. I think that would be your call if you wanted to put it under the salaries line or other expenses, which you would explain below. I understand what you're saying, but I think that would just be up to you. And that brings me actually, the comment box on the budget might be, the comment box appears in a number of places throughout the application, and you know, the question whether, how important is the comment box. On the budget form, I would say the comment box is important. If we do have a budget narrative, which you'll fill out, but also it doesn't hurt to put things in this comment box. You know, if you have a big deficit, you might put a note about why. If you have a surplus, you might put a note about why. If you have grant dollars that are allocated for something specific in your program that make your budget look, maybe might look, I'm going to use the term funky, but it's not an obvious reason why you would need money because your budget form doesn't look a certain way, you might make some comments in this comment box. Because remember, our reviewers that are reviewing these applications do not necessarily work in this field. They're not dealing with the program budgets like we do on a daily basis. So the more information you provide them, the better. Okay, so we have a program budget narrative. And again, this is where there's some specific questions to respond to about your budget. We are asking you to calculate out what % of your request to United Way is your overall budget, reminding you it can't be more than 35%. And you're going to talk about how the funds will be used. Again, we don't say you can't use the funds for certain things, but the volunteers want to have a sense of, well, which items in your budget will the United Way funds support? And also, you might note here too, if you do have anticipated grants, but you're not sure if they're going to come in, you might either put that in the comment box on the budget form, or you might put some information here on item number 3 or some other areas of the form. This is really your chance to tell your story about your budget. So again, this is, make sure you're saving this form as you go along, as you work in it, and when it's ready to go, you can submit. And finally, we have this Opportunity 2028 Collaboration Survey, which is actually not scored, but it's a really important way we're gathering some information about things that are happening that align with the bold goals and helping us to get a sense of work that's happening throughout our 5 counties. So while it's not scored, it is very important data that we're gathering. And so it is a required form for all applicants. And I'll just return to the main screen. So I've walked through all the portions of the program budget. I do have a few more slides to go back to in the PowerPoint, but I'm going to leave the online form. So if anybody has any questions specific to the form, please share those. Who do we contact if we have any access issues to the form? So we've set up an email, grants@unitedwayem.org, which is being monitored by 3 or 4 different people, including our wonderful IT guru, John Young. So we will be able to be as responsive as possible, or you can always call our 941-2800 number. The instruction manual we put together is fairly comprehensive, so if you can try to reference that before calling, not because we don't want to help you, but you might get your answer quickly there. So In the performance indicator narrative, can you talk a little bit more about those questions? Let me see if I'm going to do that in my slides, Lisa. I think I might. So if not, I can come back. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow now. So it should be showing the PowerPoint again. And please just someone let me know if it is. Thank you. Okay. So I went over a lot of, I was going to try to flip between the two, but it doesn't work very well that way. So I'm going to try not to be redundant here, but just to reiterate, there's an agency section where you'll be uploading documents. And I promise you that this, when you get to your form, it will be able to upload documents. That form had already been submitted, so I couldn't show you how to upload. Your board of directors listing, your administrative and financial, and the agency form. So the program section has many elements to it, which I walked through each one, and I'm going to go into just a little bit more detail on some of these. So the shared performance measures and narrative. This is where you're going to choose which outcomes and indicators you're applying under and set your targets. So that was both the outcome form and the indicator form, and you'll set your targets for what you expect that specific indicator to reach over the year. And then there's the narrative form, which is a separate form where you will be defining the chosen indicators and what they mean to your programming. And Lisa had asked for an example. I don't know if I can do one on the fly after training for an hour and a half. Let me think. And you're going to define how your program activities and services positively influence the outcome and the headline indicator, how you're collecting that data, and the impact on your clients. So I'm going to go back a few slides to when I had the examples and see if I can talk through that. For an example. So there was a question about how what we indicated above flowed up. Okay. Sorry, hopefully not making anyone dizzy. So all of the questions also appear in that Word document. That's the question reference guide. And this is, so the question around how what you're doing flows up. And I don't have a printout of the question reference guide in front of me. It's just not a good idea, but it's really your, it's you just reiterating how does what we're doing contribute to the whole. So we're really, I mean, we're looking for a high level connection here. We're not looking for you to say very specifically X, Y, and Z. It's around, we believe that by doing this, you know, this intervention, we know that it can contribute to, we believe that it contributes to the bold goal, or that the people we're working with are, you know, being positively impacted in other areas of their life as a result of participating in this program, or things like that. So we're looking for a really high level answer for that, Lisa, I think, around how it flows up. But let's see if, let me just keep going, and then if we can get back to it, or we can talk more offline about that. So that's the shared performance measurement narrative, not too different from what we had before for people who've been funded before with the logic model narrative. So, I mean, it's just asking you to put some more information behind the data and how you're collecting it. So this is a little bit more about the shared performance measurement narrative. These are the specific questions. So what are the strategies, the activities you're using to define the indicator? How do they feed up to positively influence the outcome, which I was just talking a little bit about. How do these activities and services contribute to the headline indicator? And again, this is how do you believe they do? You may know for sure that they do, and you may have some information about that, but it also is, you know, how do you believe that they do? How do these activities positively impact clients over the short or long term? And describe how you're collecting that data. I talked a lot about the demographics. So again, just know that this is for the whole program. So it may be that your indicators, you're talking about a subset of people in your program, you very likely are. But we want these demographics to reflect the whole program. That's how we talk about how many people are served by United Way and our partners. That's how we talk about our geographic impact. So that's why we're looking for the whole program information. But don't get hung up on whether you feel like the number is enough, because our volunteers are not, I mean, they want to look at the impact and how many people are going to be served by your program, but they're not necessarily making decisions. I mean, we fund programs that support maybe what people might consider a small number of people to a very huge number of people. So don't get hung up on that. I talked a little bit about the program narrative already. This is just what some of those questions are. Okay, good. I'm glad I could answer your question, Lisa. So I won't get into the details of this. Again, the questions are in the question narrative guide, the application question guide. The program budget, again, just to reiterate that this is income and expenditures related only to the program, not your whole agency. And I talked about the collaboration survey and how it is required, but it's not going to be scored. But I can assure you the data will be used. So please know that when you're filling that form out. I'm afraid my video from Pat isn't going to work, and I think due to time, I'm going to skip it. But I can send it out if the attachment isn't too large, or we'll post it on our website so people can still view it. Because it really is a great video. Pat Kimball is a United Way board member. She's been a contributor to United Way for over 30 years. She's been involved in the review process. Many of you know her because she was the executive director of Wellspring for years. And she does share some great tips, but I just think due to time this morning, I don't want to take any time for questions or anything to show the video, but we'll make sure it gets in a place where you can view it because it's worth it. So to reiterate, the applications will be live Friday. We will be having Zoom office hours, which we will share with the list of applicants. The application is due January 25th, which is a Friday, and it is an extended deadline from the original date that we had put out there. We expect funding decisions to be announced late May, early June, and July 1st is the date the funding year starts. And I did mention that grants at unitedwayem.org is the main box to send questions to and to call our main line. And we are monitoring that pretty consistently by multiple people so we can be as responsive as possible. But I do want to note our office is closed the week from December 24th till after Christmas. We're closed that week. So just be aware of that. And then December 24th to the 28th, and then New Year's Day is a holiday here. So be aware of those pieces of the timeline. If you can get your questions in early, that's great. We know things always arise towards the end, and we certainly will be as responsive as possible, as quickly as possible. And we are undergoing a staff transition, so our capacity is a little bit diminished. So the sooner you get to us, the better we can serve you. So just to know that. And that's the slideshow. Thank you for your patience with the technology. And I hope that you got some good information, and I'm happy to take any questions either. I'd love to hear some voices. So if anybody wants to ask a question verbally, that would be great too.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Hello?
you. Yes.
Okay, quick question. I just want a little clarity on the 35%. So if this is a 3-year request, I'm going to take the budget for 3 years and it can't exceed 35%.
So it's your annual budget. So anything you're putting in
So
your
it's like just an
application.
example, it's $20,000 a year to run this program.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's
So
only,
Go
right,
ahead.
it's up to 35% of that 20. So it's,
So I could ask for a max of 7,000.
yeah, I'd have to do the math, but I'm guessing you're right.
Well, 35% is 7,000.
Yeah,
So 7,000 per year or 7,000 total?
per year. So the request you're putting in on your cover sheet, on your budget, anywhere, just think about it as the 1 year versus the 3. So that whatever funding you get from United Way, the commitment is per year, you'll get that amount.
Okay.
But we're
All right.
only
So I look at it. I get it. I look at the 1 year budget, and it's got to be 35% of that 1 year or less.
right.
Depending on
And you
what
have
we
to
need.
be able to justify the 35%. So
Right.
not
Right.
always
I'm
knowledge.
just doing the math so I understand.
Yes.
So 1 year budget, no more than 35% of that budget.
Yes.
And then you will take and give it, if it's $5,000, you would give us 5,000 each year.
Correct.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Great. I'm glad people are finding this helpful. Definitely appreciate you staying online for the technology issues, and thank you to John and everybody else for helping get that figured out quickly. The session was recorded, so that will be available. We'll send out the handouts. I'm not sure that they'll come out today, but they'll come out as soon as possible. And just to reiterate that, grants@unitedwayem.org for questions. And with that, I think we'll close. It looks like everything else is just we'll send an evaluation for feedback as well. So you can expect like an online application. I mean, well, you'll expect an online application, but also an online evaluation. All right, and so you will get an email about the application once it goes live. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye. I don't know how to stop the meeting, end the meeting.